Yes.
Yes, we can, Wael.
Okay, welcome back, Raz. You missed the intro. Not much. Okay, so in case you don't know me, I'm a Microsoft Business Applications MVP. So I've been working with Dynamics as a start, or Microsoft CRM, since like 2014. So I've had lots of journeys delivering projects using this technology, and more recently PowerPlatform and all the exciting technology that's coming out. I've put in some links here in case you want to reach out to me to ask any questions. So I'll post these as well on the chat. So if you have any questions about the presentation, if you're facing any challenges with your projects, feel free to reach out to me and I'll try and help you as well. Okay. So let's move on. Okay, I'm going to switch off the video, I think, because it may cause a little bit of a bandwidth issue, but I'll open it up when we take some questions. Feel free to ask any questions during the presentation. I'll try and keep an eye on the chat, and then we'll have some time, hopefully, for questions in the end. Okay. So I normally would talk about introduction to DevOps and how can we apply DevOps and continuous integration and delivery on the Power Platform projects. However, today we've seen lots of great sessions showing ALM. That was a really good introduction to LLM, and then another one to DevOps and how we can import, export solutions, pack solutions, all this kind of interesting stuff that you have to do on your projects. So today I want to talk about something slightly different. I want to take this a little bit further. So if you're doing a release to a production environment, the chances are that you're missing to import the solution or your main solution into the production environment are very slim. It can be very easily detected. But if you don't have full automation and you still have some manual steps in addition to the solution, then there is a chance you may miss one of these steps on the test environment, on a production environment, or if you're creating a brand new environment. So today I'm going to be focusing on what else you need to do in addition to your solutions to kind of trend towards one-click deployments. So hopefully you will find this session useful, and let's get started. Okay. So we've seen lots of great tools again today, the Power Platform build tools. So today I'm not going to show the same tools. I'm just going to give you some variety so you can see other tools, and then you can decide what tools work best for the current scenario that you're dealing with your projects. So the first tool I'm going to use is called the XRM CI Framework. So initially released in 2014 for Dynamics or CRM 2013. So this tool currently supports, CRM on-premise 8.2 and also, the 9.x versions online on-prem. So XRM CI Framework is a PowerShell module and a .NET, library. So the .NET library contains most of the common logic that you need. That you may need when you're creating your build and release pipelines. So it contains things like importing solutions or, publishing a workflow and things like that. So if you're writing .NET code and you want to use some of these capabilities, then you can use that .NET library. But it also contains a PowerShell module. So the PowerShell module contains lots of scripts, and these scripts build on top of the common library, but also build on top of all the scripts that are provided, by Microsoft as part of the SDK. So you can use these scripts, on your development machines. You can use them in your pipelines in Azure DevOps. You can use them in Jenkins or TeamCity or anything else that can invoke a PowerShell script. So it gives you lots of options. So this is the kind of the core of the framework. So this is exactly just what I explained. So you can see we've got the common library, the PowerShell modules, and all of that sits on all the new capabilities that are getting provided by Microsoft. So on top of that, we have the Power DevOps tools. This may have been called the Dynamics 365 build tools. However, I found that the name was a little bit limiting because you can actually use the tool with the Power Platform. So I decided to call it the Power DevOps Tools. I almost called it the Power Platform DevOps Tools, but I think it would have been a funny situation now, given Microsoft just released the Power Platform DevOps Tools. So I think it was a good choice, probably. So this tool was released in January 2017. It's got almost 8,000 downloads at the moment. Most of the tasks will work with on-premise and 8.2, but some of the environments management and some of the kind of other tasks may not work with that. It's free and open source on GitHub, so you can go and have a look. You can raise issues. You can view the source code as well. You can see what's going on, and you can contribute, of course. So what does the Power DevOps Tools do? It's basically a list of tasks that you can use in your build and release pipelines, whether in the UI or whether in the YAML or primarily. So most of the tasks are around managing solutions. You can do also environment management, but I also take that a little bit further. So it covers the reference data management, environment configuration, deploying packages, plugins, web resources, all this kind of stuff. So it's about 48 tasks in the toolkit today. So if you've got any ideas for any other task, if you're having any challenges on your projects, just let me know or raise a pull request as well. So this is what I'm going to be walking you through today. So I've recently launched a YouTube channel as well. Sometimes I used to do events in the past and then people wouldn't be able to attend because they were local. So I'm glad we have the opportunity now to do these virtual events as well. So many people ask me, how do you get started with the Power DevOps tools, introduction to DevOps, etc. So I've created a DevOps channel and I've uploaded a video initially that explains to you how to get started with the Power DevOps tools. So in case you haven't used the Power DevOps tools or you're new to DevOps, you can go on that channel and you can watch this video. I plan obviously to upload more content for development, architecture, DevOps, Power Platform, whatever I think will be useful for the community. If you've got any ideas of something that you want to see, let me know as well. All right, don't want to play this now. Okay, so in terms of the solutions, so we've seen lots of sessions on how we can move solutions, and I just want to put a little pause and talk about solutions, because I think solutions are very important in the Power Platform. Initially, you can move forms and metadata, but now there is more and more things you can put in the solutions. And today I had a look in the morning. And there's even more things that you can see on the slide today because there is more things coming. So the idea is that the solution will be the container that you can hopefully transport everything you need as part of that container from one environment to another. However, today there are still some things that are not part of the solution or they don't work very well with the solution. So I'm going to try and cover these as well. So just wanted to mention that in case you're not aware, obviously you can move flow using solutions today. You can move Canvas apps, environment variables has been added recently as well, PCF controls, and a lot more. Okay, so one of the first things I'm going to cover, and I keep getting asked questions, how do I delete components when I do deployments using the pipeline? And maybe I didn't focus on that in the past, so I just wanted to spend a little bit of time today show you how you can delete components using pipelines. So let's get started. So I have a development environment which has a solution. So it's called the XRM CI sample solution. You may have seen this in the past. And inside that solution, there is lots of there is one entity actually, which is contact. And you've noticed I didn't add the full contact entity. I just added, the things that I've changed. But there is a field here called delete me. So obviously what I'm going to do is I'm going to delete this field from the solution. So if I delete this field, it doesn't actually delete. You have to save the entity. So that will basically delete the field from the development environment from that solution. So let's go into pipelines. So let's have a look at my pipelines. So it's taking a little bit of time. So I have a pipeline called export solution. Let's just use this pipeline for now. And then let's run the pipeline. So this is gonna basically export the solution, without that field. So let's run this pipeline. I know there was some challenges exporting solutions today, so hopefully we won't hit the same issue. So let's take a look at what this pipeline is doing in the meantime. So this one is very simple. It's actually using the old version of the tools. I'll talk about the new version in a little bit, but very standard, the tool installer, publish all the customizations, set the version of the solution to the build number, and then, export the solution. We're exporting the managed solution. So if you want to delete components using the out-of-the-box capabilities, you have to use managed solutions. So that's one important thing to note. And then, we're just publishing the solution to the artifacts repository. So, very simple pipeline. Let's see what the pipeline is doing. It's publishing customizations. Hopefully that will not take very long. In the meantime, if you got any questions on anything, just try and put it on the chat or ask a question. Okay. So once this pipeline or this build is completed, I'm going to create a release pipeline. And the release pipeline is going to try to basically import the solution into the target environment, but at the same time, while it's importing, is going to try to, delete the solution. You can see I'm I'm getting some connectivity issues, but second attempt worked. I had one of the builds fail earlier today because of that. So this is going to hopefully not take too long. So let's take at the release pipeline, not this one. I'll go into that one in a little bit. So I'm going to use a different pipeline to import the solution. So it's called the releases. Let's go into releases. And I'm going to use the import stage pipeline. So let's take a look at what this pipeline is doing. So this pipeline has got a number of tasks. So it's got different agents, jobs, as you can see. So what's going to happen is I'm going to use the tool installer task as usual to get the tools, and then I'm going to import the solution. When I'm importing the solution, I'm going to take this holding solution option. So what that does, it stages the solution for upgrade. It means it creates a solution on the side. It doesn't override the existing solution, but it creates a solution with the underscore upgrade. And then I'm going to put some manual intervention. So, and this is something you could use in your releases. If you've automated, for example, 95% of things, and then you got 5% that you still do manually for whatever reason, you could inject a manual intervention into your pipeline, and you need to run this on the agentless job because it doesn't actually need like an agent to run. It just runs, it's just a pause. And after that, I create another agent job. You can actually create an agent job from here by adding an agent job. So because an agent job could run on another server, you need to add the tool installer again. So this is more like starting a new release or a new, portion of pipeline. And then after that, instead of importing the solution, obviously I'm going to do an upgrade. So upgrade is another task. You give it the solution name, and it basically, applies the upgrade. So hopefully this build has completed, which is great. So I'm going to create a new release, which is going to deploy this, most recent build, I think. Let's just double check the version. Yeah, it's 0.5. So let's create the release. So this one shouldn't take too long. If we look in our, what is this called? The production environment or the other environment that I'm deploying into. At the moment, we've got, the XRM CI version solution at version 1.0075. So when this thing runs, it should, increment the version and delete that file. So let's see what's going to happen. I try and keep my solutions small when I'm doing demos and things like that, because it's good to see that it will take a lot quicker to demo. So I've got a question from Prabhu. It says, I export the solution and commit in the Git repo. It would be great if we can suggest how to refer to that solution in the build pipeline. Okay, so there is a question around how to commit the solution to the Git repository. Okay, so I'll try and show that in a little bit. All right, I think this is finished, but sometimes the screen doesn't refresh. Or things are just slow today. Okay. All right, so the solution has imported. So let's go and take a look in the environment. So I'm going to refresh this page just to see what's happening. Yeah. Actually, the solution was already there. So you can see this is my original solution. It's still there. And in addition to that, I've got the 1.0.5 solution. So if we look in this existing solution, if we look at the contact entity, we should see the delete me field. But however, if we go back to the, the other solution, let's go back to the other solution, this new solution that's getting imported now. If we go into the contact entity, yeah, that field has disappeared, yeah. But the field is still in the system because I haven't applied the upgrade. So this gives you a chance to actually go and check in the system, if you want to do any checks before you, apply the upgrade. So if I go in here now, I could resume that, deployment, and then that should, in theory, apply that solution. So only one solution will remain in the system. So I'm going to let that run, and then I'm going to. So there's another question about the rollback mechanism in the solution. Yeah, that's an interesting one. I can talk about it maybe in the end, in terms of the rollback. So just remind me. Okay. So let's go back to the slides for a second. Hopefully my presentation's still there. Okay, so we've spoken about deleting solutions. So the next step is around, the additional things. So we know we can import the solution, which is adding or updating components. We know we can delete components that we no longer require. And so that kind of covers probably, lots of percentage of, your changes. But if we look at the whole ecosystem in terms of how many technologies we're using today, there is so many things that you can use and lots of capabilities that are very useful. And lots of things you need to worry about. So you need to worry about backups and restores. You need to worry about your configuration data. You need to worry about your integrations to the Azure functions, integrations to the service bus. You may have portals. You may have some custom steps that you want to run on your environment. So there's lots of things you need to worry about. And the more things you use, then the more things you need to worry about, because you need to make sure that when you deploy something to an environment, then all of these things happen and they also talk to each other. So the right environment talks to the right environment, otherwise you could end up with problems. So I'm going to show you some pipelines with a few things that I've, learned over the years in terms of how you can, get more automated. So one of the first tools I'm going to be talking about is the configuration migration tool. So I mentioned data. So configuration migration tool is a tool that's been around for a while. And basically it allows you to export the data from a source environment. Before you export the data, you need to create the schema, which is defining the attributes and the entities and the relationships and the records that you want to export. And then once you do the export, you get a zip file with an XML file, and then you can then use that zip file to import that data into another environment. So up until a few months back, we were able to, we had obviously the tool which could do that using the UI. We were able to import the data as well using the package deployer, but there wasn't any utilities that were available to export the data automatically, but also import the data without a package. So this capability is now available, and I'm going to show you how to use it today. But before we jump into that, I also want to show you something else, and I want to talk about the package deployer. So the package deployer is like a container. Think of it like a container, and then you put inside that container everything that you want to, ship to the next environment. So you can put solutions in there. You can put your data from the configuration migration tool. You can also execute custom code on the target environment. So if you want to upload things to the marketplace, for example, you have to use the package deployer. So the package deployer, again, has a UI tool. It also has a PowerShell module, which allows you to run that package, from a pipeline or, from your developer machine as well. So the idea behind the package deployer is that, once you run this package, you should have most of your release steps coded within that package, especially if you're deploying to marketplace. So we'll take a look at that. So let's, before we do that, let's look at the release that was running. So that release has succeeded. So if we go back to my environment, let's go into solutions. You can see there's only one version of the solution now. So that's the latest version. And I'm hoping this delete me attribute is no longer there, basically. So yeah, so the attribute was deleted. You can do same things for other things in terms of other components, but you just have to be careful sometimes with the dependencies. If you're trying to delete something that has a dependency, you can get into a little bit of problems. Okay, so let's take a look at the configuration data. So I've got the configuration data here. So once you open the configuration migration tool and you log into the environment, you can create a schema. I'm going to open an existing schema just to show you, what's going on. So for this demo, I have two entities. Yeah. So I've got the reference data, which is like a sample entity, which got a number of different fields like name, value pair. I've also got the theme. So if you look at my dev environment, let's take a look. Where's my dev environment? I think is this tab. No, that's the production environment. So you see, I've got this fancy theme in here with a different color and a logo. So my goal is to take that theme from dev into production. If we look at my production environment, it's very dark at the moment. So I'm going to, what I'm also going to do is I'm going to add a new reference data record. So let's just, I don't know what's going on with the screen, but I'm going to try and use the tab keys. The keyboard, okay, save the record. Okay, so let's see if that record got created. So we've got another record. So we've got another record that we want to promote and we want to apply that theme. So if we go back to the configuration migration tool, there is a little bit of limitation in this tool with regards to themes. And you may notice that with some of the other out-of-the-box records. So what this allows you to do, for example, it allows you to import most of the data relating to the theme. So the only thing it doesn't allow you to do, or I couldn't figure out how to do it with this tool, is setting the logo and publishing the theme. So if I just import this theme into the environment, basically it takes me like 80% there, but it's not gonna set the logo and apply the theme. So before we do anything, let's just, so one of the things we want to do is we want to make sure this data is in source control. So if I go into my PowerShell, command line, I've got a script called, export the data. So when this script runs, it will ask me what environment I want to take the data from. So I'm going to use this dev environment. So it's going to, okay, it's exported the data. And I think there was a question from Prabhu in terms of how am I going to store the solution in source control. So let's take a look at another script. So there's another script I have, it's called extract, which is basically exporting the solution from the dev environment and unpacking that solution into source control. And I think we've seen that concept in a number of sessions earlier today. So I'm not going to go through into too much details, but if I export that solution again, it's going to try and export that solution from the dev environment, and we'll see what's going to happen in a second. So if I go back to my Visual Studio solution, let's go into the sample solution. So you're probably wondering where are these scripts coming from. So I have a project which basically doesn't do anything at the moment. It's just got a number of NuGet packages attached to it. So I've attached the solution packager, which is part of the core tools, and I've attached the XRM CI Framework NuGet library. So that basically gets me the libraries. And these two, this one contains the solution packager, that one contains all the XRM CI tools and scripts. So for example, if we take a look at the data, this is the export script that I was using. So all it's doing is just looking for the XRM CI framework, and it's basically just executing a script from the XRM CI framework. So sorry, this is the extracting the solution. If you look at the data, I've got a similar script that also uses one of the scripts in the XRM CI framework. So that takes care of that. So let's take a look at what changes these things caused. So you can see in terms of the reference data, you can see I've added a new record here, which is the record that we've added from the UI. So out of the box, the configuration migration tool gives you like one XML file or zip file. So what I've done is I am taking that a step further. So I've actually, one is I unpacked that zip file into, multiple files. And the second one is I've split it by entity. And I've also sorted the records. So you can actually see all the records in here in separate files, which makes it a lot more easier to track in source control, because the last thing you want is one big XML file with 5,000 records and you add one record and then, you have no idea. So in terms of filtering the data, I think in terms of filtering the data, in terms of this data, there is a capability that that is part of the part of this configuration migration tool. If you get the new version, you can go into the tools and you can do configure data settings and sorry, that's not this one. Yeah, configure the not date, configure import settings. So there is something called the edit fetch XML query. So if you look at the theme, for example, so this is the theme that I'm going to look at. So I've added a fetch XML query to only take the theme that I'm interested in. Otherwise, it's going to pull all the out of the box themes which I'm not interested in. So yeah, you can filter records using fetch XML filtering queries. Okay, so let's go back. Let's just just commit this data. So commits and push. Okay, so after we commit that data, we want to take that data to a number of and the solution to a number of other environments. So I'm going to show you a different pipeline for that. So this is called the export sources sync. So let's run this pipeline, and then we can see what happens. I can explain what this pipeline is doing. Okay. So this pipeline is running. One more thing I wanted to show you is if we go back to my XRM sample solution, I talked about the package deployer. So I have in this package deployer, as I mentioned before, so this tool allows you to execute custom code, and there's different events you can hook into, like before you import the solution or after you import the solution. So in this case, I'm executing something after the import of the solution, and it's called publish theme. So it's very simple piece of code, which is basically, it's not the most optimal code, but it does the job for now. So basically, you get the theme, and then you check whether the theme is published, and you get the logo. And basically, if there are any changes to either the theme, whether it's not published or the logo, then it will basically, so this is all the work is happening here. So it's going to update the logo based on the logo, or it's going to publish this theme as well, which is using the publish theme request. So when you're creating packages, you don't want to do things if they're already there. So I also like to put some checks in these release packages, because if the theme is already published, the logo is already there, there's no point in me trying to do that again. So it will just save some time, and you run into less issues. So that's it. Basically, we've got the data, and we've got some code to publish the theme and set the logo. So let's go back into the pipeline. So this pipeline is running. So let's take a look at what this pipeline is doing. Okay, so this pipeline is doing lots of things. I'm not going to go through into details. I want to focus more on the release part. But what is relevant, I think, here is obviously we're exporting the solution again, but we're also, packing the configuration migration data. So that data that is in source control in XML files, I don't want to store it in a zip in source control. So there is a task as part of the Power DevOps tools, which basically you tell it, what folder, where the folder that your data sits in. So in this case, it's like the, where is it? Data, and then the reference data. So this is all the kind of raw data. You can see there's multiple entities and schema and stuff like that. So basically, we generate this zip file, and then we upload it as an artifact. And there's an option to combine the data. So if you're using the multiple entities, it will just, put them in one file. If you have one file, yeah. So yes, you're right. The package deployer, I think there's one question around the package deployer. I think the package deployer also has the capability to, sorry, let me see, has the option to import as a holding without applying it directly. I'm not sure, to be honest, if you can do that with the package deployer. You may be able to cancel the event using one of the methods, but I haven't tried it personally. Okay, so let's go back to this build. So the build has completed. So let's try and release that build. So let's create a new release. So we're going to release, this new build. Sorry, I'm on the wrong release. So yeah, let's try and release this build. So let's create a new release. And let's see what this release is doing. So there's lots of steps I've added into this release pipeline, actually. Sorry. Edit the release. Okay. So as you can see, there's lots of steps. I'll go through each one and tell you what they are doing and why they are there. So the first one is the package or the tool installer. So it's called the tool installer. It doesn't actually install anything at this stage. It just configures the setting for the other tasks that will come after that. So all this tool is doing is just defining, where your packages are going to come from and what version of packages you want to use. It doesn't download anything for performance reasons, because the last thing you want is download all the tools and then have one task after that, and you're not going to use half of them. So this tool is just basically configuring where you're going to get the sources. So you can get it from NuGet or the PowerShell gallery. If you're running on a private agent that doesn't have access to NuGet, then you can specify a custom source. So you can go into custom feed and you can specify the URL or the folder on the agent where the tools are. The other thing that you can do is you can specify the version of the specific tool that you want to use. So by default, it comes packaged and tested with a specific version. So for example, if you want to find out Core Tools, which is the solution packager, is using this version, you can go in and you can see what version is currently using, and you can also see that there's been some changes to that version since the release of this Power and DevOps tools. So if you don't want to use this version, you can use that. You can change that by specifying that later version. The other thing you can do is you can specify latest. So what that does is, when this task runs, it will always pull the latest version. Obviously, you have to be careful with this if there are breaking changes. But you have the option for some tools like the solution packager. If you always want to stay the latest version, you can do that. And you can see in terms of the configuration migration tool, I'm actually on version 26, but I've overridden the version in the pipeline to use version 44. I think this is useful sometimes if you don't want to go to the latest version, you want to use an older version, you can use that. But also if the tool hasn't been upgraded, you can also up the version yourself. So the next step I'm going to show is the set admin mode. So how many times you've been doing a deployment to the test environment and the environment is frozen because you're importing the solution, and then testers start complaining, for example, that I can't use the environment, or they may even raise a defect for that. And sometimes the solution is imported, but you're still in the middle of doing things. So what you can do is you can use this task to set the environment into admin mode, which basically locks everyone out except the system administrators, and hopefully your testers don't have the system administrator role. And it puts this message that there's a release in progress. So that's quite useful. It also doesn't run some of the workflows that you may have running, which is useful, I think, because it just allows the system to focus on using importing the solution and other things. You can back up the environment as well. So to back up the environment, I think it's worth mentioning, obviously, you need to set the label to know which release that is relating to. And then there's a few options in the backup, which I find useful, including what happens if the backup already exists. Now, why would the backup already exist? Well, if you run this pipeline and you reach step 5 and it fails, and then you want to retry it, you probably don't want to take a backup again, yeah? So you have the option to skip or error or to take another backup. So I think that's quite useful because, in a lot of cases, connectivity issues and other things, pipeline can fail. So you have the chance to, skip or take another backup if you want. This is fairly straightforward now. So importing the solution, I'm not going to cover that. So service endpoints is another thing I wanted to cover briefly. So let's take a look at service endpoints. I think this is quite interesting. So if we look at the customizations in source control, because I unpacked the solution into source control, I can actually look at my service endpoints. So So this is how one of the service endpoints look like. So this is basically the URL of the Azure function that I want to call. So I've added this service endpoint to the solution, but you can clearly see there's a problem with that, because the moment I deploy this into the production environment, for example, it's going to hit this dev URL, and it's going to potentially try and connect to the dev environment, which is not a good idea. So for this reason, I don't actually put this service endpoint in the solution at the moment. I think there may be some capabilities coming where you can set these to environment variables. The other thing is the token is not part of the service endpoint because it doesn't go on source control because it's sensitive information. So what I have is a service endpoints JSON file, which basically lists the service endpoints and the steps associated with that. And you have, well, basically I put some tokens in here. So the URL I'm going to switch at runtime, and the authentication token I'm going to switch at runtime depending on the environment. And you can say the same things for the plugin registration. Actually, the only thing I'm going to show about plugin registration, I know you could deploy this using pipelines, but it's probably not the best idea for releases. But if you look at one of the steps, for example, let's take a look at this step, for example, and I know the GUIDs now. So this step has a unsecure configuration in the step. You can pass secure and unsecure configuration to the step. So the unsecure configuration is stored inside the solution, but the secure configuration is not stored inside the solution. So when you deploy that, to the target environment, you're missing a setting. And in this specific scenario, if we look at my plugins, let's take a look at this post contact create plugin. So I'm actually reading the what is this called? I'm reading the secure and the unsecure string, and I'm updating the contact before it gets created. It's not a business use case, but it actually shows you that you need to pull information from this. So if we go back to my pipeline, I could one is I'm running I'm replacing the token. So I've got a JSON file in source control or in the artifacts, and I want to replace it with some variables that are coming from here. So let's say prod environment. I want to set to the prod Azure function, and I want to where's the so this is the token is encrypted for the Azure function, for example. So if I go back to the tasks, there's a task called service endpoint registration. So what that does, it takes the JSON file and updates your environment based on that file with the correct URL and the token. I've got another task which imports the configuration data into the environment. So this is the theme and that reference data. And there is a few other tasks that we can cover, which is like updating the environment variables. So if you're using environment variables, so for example, if we go back into the what's this called? This thing here, the solution, you can filter by the type. Actually, environment variables. So you can see I've got a number of environment variables, and if you've not used environment variables, you can put them as part of the solution, and you can set the values based on the environment, so they're not fixed. So when you import the solution, you can update the values. So there is another task for that, which is basically switching the environment variables to the environment. So in this case, I'm setting that environment variable to this value of prod, and I'm setting this value to the release ID, just to show you that you can put dynamic values. So after the solution is imported, you can actually reconfigure the solution based on that environment. There's another task which does your secure plugin configuration. So I'm saying that for this step, I want to set this secure plugin configuration. And then after all of that, I take the instance out of admin mode, and then I run all sorts of different types of tests, which I'm not going to go through today. I think there's another session that Jordy's doing, and there's probably a few other sessions on testing today as well. from Trish, I think. So if you're interested in testing, you can go to these sessions to learn more about that. So as you can see, you can do lots of things with pipelines. That probably doesn't cover everything I needed to do, but it gives you an idea of what are the things that you can do in your pipelines. So let's take a look at. Sorry, not this one. Once you have too many pipelines, it's difficult to keep track of them. I actually haven't deployed the pipeline. So let's deploy that now, and then we still got a few minutes. I'm sure it will finish before the session. Okay, so let's leave that to run, and we'll come back to it. Let's go back to the slides a little bit. There's a few things I wanted to cover as well. So yeah, I'm going to cover some of the PowerShell modules that are available today. So you got the online management API, which obviously allows you to manage your environments. So some of the tasks that are part of the Power DevOps tools are based on these APIs. So like the backup and the putting the instance in the admin mode. But you can do more things. You can create environments, you can reset them, you can do a backup restore, and you can also manage your encryption keys. So I encourage you to take a look at that. There are some Power Apps modules that are in preview. So for example, there is two modules. One of them is for the makers. So for example, you can get information about your environments. You can add your app to the solution. You can publish your app and change the display name, and you can manage some of your flows as well. So there is another module for the makers, sorry, for the admins. So this one allows you to have a bit more control, because this is more from an admin point of view. So you can create, update, and delete environments, for example, and you got some more settings in terms of your flows and Canvas apps. But you can also manage your DLP policies, which kind of control how your connectors, behave for your flows and your Power Apps, in terms of limiting what connectors you can use and what connectors you can combine with what connectors. So if you've got lots of environments and you want to apply that across all your environments, so every time you create an environment, for example, you can use this PowerShell module as well. There's Power Apps Checker as well. It's got a PowerShell module for Power Apps Checker. I know the tasks are there, but if you want to use, for example, some of the features that are not available in the tasks, you can use the PowerShell module. So I'm not going to go through that today, but let's do a quick demo while that pipeline is running. So I wanted to show you this Power Apps modules. So the first thing you have to do, for example, before you use the admin API, is you need to import the module. So I've downloaded that module from the PowerShell gallery. So once you import the module, for example, it allows you to get information about flows. So there's a command called get admin flow. So in this case, I've got two flows in different environments. It's the same flow, it just gets deployed into multiple environments. And for example, in the dev environment, you could see that the flow is enabled. So if your flow is disabled, for example, or you want to enable it, or the other way around, then there is another commandlet called disable admin flow, for example. So you could, if you do disable the admin flow in the dev environment, and then you go back to get admin flow, you can see in the first environment your flow is disabled, but in the second environment is enabled. So again, this gives you this allows you to do these things from your pipelines if you need to. I mean, this is just showing you how to enable and disable flows, which may be something you need to do, but there's lots of other commandlets that I encourage you to explore to kind of increase the level of automation that you have. Finally, let's take a look at this pipeline. It's running tests now. So if I go back to my production environment and I refresh the page, you can see the theme has changed. The logo's there, so everything is working as expected. So that kind of proves that package was working as expected, including the reference data, because now I didn't have a theme, but if I refresh now this page, you can see I've got the XRM CI sample theme, which was deployed as part of the reference data, but then we've activated that theme using the package deployer. So there's a few minutes left, so I wanted to open it up for questions. I know there's been lots of questions on the channel, but I didn't get a chance to look at all of them. So feel free to unmute your mics, or can you put there was a question around rollback, actually. So in terms of the rolling back the solution, I mean, from what I have seen, there are a number of ways to do it. I think one of them is to back up the environment and then deploy your solution, run your tests. If you don't like what you see in that environment because something is broken, then you restore the backup. The backup does take a little bit of time to restore, so you need to allow for that window. Another thing you can do, I know the recommendation is not to use patches at the moment, but if you do have some quick fixes that you want to release and you do install a patch, then you can delete that fairly easily, and then your environment goes back to what it was. But you can see deployments are a little bit more complex than just solutions. You can have data, you can have settings. So, I think the backup is restore is more reliable because it kind of covers things end to end.
Thanks again, Wael. There is a question. So Phil's asking, would you deploy an Azure function that's solely used in Dynamics within the same function? Do you have any thoughts on managed identities and application users?
With regards to the Azure function, it's an interesting question, and I've seen it done in different ways. I would say if the function is always used with Dynamics, then obviously there is a good argument to deploy it as part of the Dynamics solution. However, there may be cases where you want to just fix the Azure function. If you find the defect in the Azure function and you just want to fix that. So being able to deploy the Azure function and the CRM solution in the same pipeline without releasing the CRM solution and just doing the Azure function requires a little bit of work, and you have to be a little bit careful. So for simplicity, you could have two pipelines that are deployed independently, I think, given their separate components. That's what I normally do.
Yep, thanks, Will. And there are questions. We can only take a couple of questions. So there is a question by Dash saying, can you show how to create a pipeline for rollback mechanism in a solution?
I don't have time to show it because I don't have a rollback pipeline at the moment. So normally the rollback pipeline would contain a step which is called restore, and then you would give it the backup ID, so it would restore the pipeline. So it's should be fairly straightforward to just add a pipeline that does a restore with a specific backup ID.
Okay, so I think that's perfect timing. Yes, I think we're done. So again, thanks, Wael. So the reason why Wael did the session in such a way, in more of a Q&A kind of flow, was because, as he mentioned, is that he's already got a massive video library. So, Wael, can you please share your video library to the community in the chat window? That'd be great, as well as on your window for those who are not logged into Teams and accessing it via YouTube or Twitter. So they know how to follow you. There you are. So there's the YouTube channel. Make sure you follow YouTube, Wael's channel there, and you will find the other videos related to the steps on how to actually configure the pipelines, which is probably, I think, where most people are looking to get started, really, is just understanding how to actually configure the pipelines for themselves. And I think that's a really great place to begin. There are also going to be some sessions later on today covering that as well. But once again, Wael, you have been a pioneer for the community. It's always a great pleasure to have you and for your efforts in the way you've kind of supported us. So I want to give a big shout out, big thank you for everything you've been doing for the so many years now. Yes, so it was great to have a legend, a Wael, who delivered more of a Q&A kind of session today. And I think everyone is satisfied. Again, you will be definitely satisfied if you follow up and you see all the material that Wael has shared. So from one legend to another, we have Wael, who was the pioneer of CI/CD and DevOps for Dynamics 365.